And the Democrats, they want Donald Trump to call him names. And the president addressed that.
Thing.
And then he's supposed to call him and say, Vladimir, you ready to talk a peace now?
Yeah.
That's not going to work.
No, it's diplomacy 101, right? Is you have to have a reasonable relationship with somebody to be able to even start the conversation. We have to remember, Sean, Ukraine, half of the country, a third of the country is totally destroyed. The economy is depressed. You've got hundreds of thousands of dead Ukrainians. Of course, a lot of dead Russians as well. The president wants to negotiate a settlement. How can you negotiate if you can't even talk to somebody? And that's what he said. He's not saying, like, nobody's suggesting, as Secretary Rubio said, no one is suggesting that we give the Nobel Peace Prize to Vladimir Putin. What we're saying is it's important for President Trump to be able to have a conversation. That's not well served by standing up at a press conference and calling the guy every negative name in the book. By the way, as we just said, President Biden.
It was an unexpected moment in the world of politics, one that sent shockwaves through the Republican Party. J.D. Vance, once a staunch ally of Donald Trump, stunned the nation during a live TV interview when he publicly turned against the former president, exposing startling truths that many had never imagined he would reveal. As Vance appeared on the popular news network, the conversation started like any other. The focus was on the upcoming midterm elections, with Vance giving his usual pro-Trump rhetoric, supporting the president's policies and decisions. But everything changed when the host, known for his sharp questioning, threw a curveball at Vance. JD, you've been one of Trump's strongest supporters, but lately there's been growing talk about whether Trump's influence is waning. What do you think about that? The host asked. For a moment, Vance hesitated. His eyes shifted, his posture slightly stiffening. This wasn't a question he was prepared for. He had always been a loyal ally, but what followed would make political history. Vance took a deep breath, his expression changing to one of serious reflection. You know, there's a lot of things I've said and believed over the years, he began. But the truth is, I've started to reconsider where we're headed as a country. Trump's leadership, it's become more about him than about the future of America. The words hung in the air, and you could see the shock on the host's face. This wasn't the J.D. Vance that millions had come to know, an unwavering supporter of the Trump agenda. He continued, his voice steady but firm. I supported Trump because I thought he was what the country needed at the time. But we're at a crossroads now. The divisiveness, the constant chaos, it's not leadership, it's just noise. And I've come to realize that we can't keep following someone whose vision is so focused on the past. Vance's revelation was stunning, not just for his supporters, but for the entire political landscape. For years, Trump had been a figure of unquestioned loyalty for many Republicans. To hear one of his most prominent allies speak out so openly was a moment that seemed to shift the ground beneath their feet. I've had enough of the personal vendettas, the distractions, and the attacks, Vance continued, his tone growing more passionate. We need a leader who will unite this country, not tear it apart. Trump's time has passed, and it's time for us to move forward. The host, stunned by the gravity of the statement, pressed further. So, are you saying you're done with Trump, that you no longer support him? Vance didn't flinch. It's not about me, it's about what's best for America. And right now, I believe we need fresh leadership that can heal the divisions Trump helped create. The reaction to Vance's
hundreds of billions of dollars in Ukraine. What is your plan? And they would honestly tell you, well, we're just going to send them weapons for as long as we can and hope eventually they can turn the tide. Hope is not a strategy. Throwing money and ammunition at a terrible conflict, that is not a strategy. The only guy in town with a strategy is the President of the United States, and everybody needs to follow his lead.
The reaction to Vance's bold statement was immediate. Social media exploded, with people on both sides of the political spectrum reacting in shock and disbelief. Supporters of Trump were furious, with many accusing Vance of betraying the man who helped propel him into political prominence. Vance is just another rhino, Republican in name only, one tweet read. He's abandoned everything that made him who he was. On the other hand, there were those who hailed Vance's honesty and bravery. Finally, someone is telling the truth, one commentator wrote. Trump's grip on the GOP is slipping, and J.D. Vance just took the first step in breaking it. In the days following the interview, Vance's comments dominated the news cycle. The Republican Party, already fractured and divided, found itself in a new era of uncertainty. With Trump's influence being questioned, Vance's defection served as a warning shot to the party establishment. Could the GOP really move forward without Trump? And if so, who would be the next leader to fill the void? For Vance, the decision to publicly denounce Trump was a bold, risky move. He knew the backlash would be intense, but he also understood that the future of the country and his own political future might depend on it. By exposing the truth, he had taken a step that few dared to make. As the dust settled, the question remained, was this the beginning of a new political era, one that would leave Trump behind? Or was it just a temporary blip in the ongoing saga of the Trump presidency and its grip on the GOP? Only time would tell. J.D. Vance's words resonated far beyond the interview itself. In the days that followed, the political world was abuzz with speculation over what this meant for the future of both the Republican Party and Donald Trump's political legacy. For Vance, the decision to expose the uncomfortable truths about Trump wasn't just a moment of honesty, it was a calculated move, one that would either elevate him to new heights or leave him isolated from a party that had been defined by the former president's influence. Vance had always positioned himself as a figure of change in the Republican Party, advocating for a shift away from the traditional establishment politics that many believed had failed working-class Americans. However, his sudden turn against Trump seemed to shock even his closest allies, many of whom had expected him to remain firmly in Trump's camp, given their shared history and political alignment. For months, the pressure had been building within the GOP. While Trump's base remained loyal, there was a growing faction of Republicans who had become disillusioned with his leadership style, his divisive rhetoric, and his failure to unify the country after his term in office. Vance, once a rising star within the conservative movement, had quietly been listening to these frustrations, and in that fateful moment on live TV, he chose to voice them publicly. In a private conversation with political insiders after the interview, Vance admitted that he had been struggling with his stance for some time. The Republican Party is at a crossroads, he confided. We're stuck in the past, and we need a new direction. Trump's leadership, while successful in certain areas, has created a culture of chaos and division. That's not the future I want for this country. It wasn't just Trump's personal behavior or the controversies that plagued his presidency that Vance was critical of. It was the entire trajectory the Republican Party had taken under Trump's reign.
It turned out to be a good choice. I took a little heat at the beginning, but he was, I knew the brain was a good one, about as good as it gets.
The rise of populism, the constant media battles, the erosion of trust in the political system, it was all part of the broader crisis of American democracy that Vance believed Trump had exacerbated rather than solved. While Vance's comments were seen by many as a betrayal of his former ally, others saw it as a courageous stand for the future of the party. J.D. Vance isn't just criticizing Trump for personal reasons, said one GOP strategist. He's recognizing that Trump's brand of politics isn't sustainable. He's thinking beyond 2024, and that's something many in the party need to do. The backlash from Trump's supporters was swift and brutal. Online platforms were flooded with comments accusing Vance of turning his back on the movement that had propelled him into the political spotlight. J.D. Vance was nothing before Trump, one user wrote. Now he's just another rhino trying to make a name for himself by attacking the man who made him relevant. Meanwhile, Trump's response was equally fiery. From his Mar-a-Lago estate, he issued a statement condemning Vance's remarks, calling him a disloyal coward who would never win the trust of the Republican base. J.D. Vance was nothing before me, and now he's showing his true colors, Trump's statement read. The people of Ohio deserve better than a phony politician who will say anything to get ahead. Despite the attacks, Vance remained steadfast in his position. In a follow-up interview, he doubled down on his critique, explaining that his decision wasn't about personal animus, but about the future of the nation. This is bigger than any individual, he said. It's about the kind of country we want to leave for our children. We can't keep fighting the battles of the past. We need new leadership. The media storm surrounding Vance's comments grew even more intense. News outlets scrambled to analyze every word he had said, questioning whether this would signal the beginning of a larger schism within the Republican Party. Political pundits debated whether Vance's defection would inspire other GOP figures to follow suit, or whether it would be a short-lived moment of dissent. One thing was clear, the political landscape had shifted, and Trump's grip on the Republican Party was no longer as secure as it once was. The question now was whether the GOP could break free from the shadow of Trump's influence and move forward with a new vision for the future. As the 2024 election loomed on the horizon, the party faced a reckoning. Could it rally behind a new leader who could unite both the Trump loyalists and the growing faction of Republicans seeking a fresh start, or would the divisions only deepen, ultimately leading to the fragmentation of the GOP? For J.D. Vance, the stakes were high. His bold move had catapulted him into the political spotlight once again, but it had also made him a target. Whether he would emerge as a leader for the future or be cast aside by the very party he had once supported remained to be seen. What was certain, however, was that J.D. Vance's dramatic turn against Donald Trump had set the stage for a new political era, one where the old alliances and loyalties would be tested in ways no one could have predicted.
What I took it as was an attack on Kamala Harris being a chameleon.
In the aftermath of J.D. Vance's explosive comments, the Republican Party found itself facing an existential crisis. The former allies of Trump, many of whom had built their political careers alongside his rise, were now forced to navigate an increasingly fractured landscape. The backlash against Vance was fierce, but it also sparked a conversation within the GOP that could no longer be ignored. His criticism wasn't just about Trump. It was about the future of the party itself. Behind closed doors, some of the most influential figures in the GOP began questioning the long-term viability of the Trump brand. For years, the party had been defined by his bombastic style and polarizing politics, but as the country grew increasingly divided, many Republicans began to wonder if Trump's approach was driving them into a political dead end. The question on everyone's mind was whether the GOP could continue to embrace the Trump formula or whether it needed to chart a new course. Vance's shift, however, wasn't just a matter of political strategy. In interviews with close associates, he opened up about the personal toll that his loyalty to Trump had taken on him. "I thought I was doing the right thing by supporting him," Vance admitted in a candid moment. "But the more I watched, the more I realized that Trump's leadership wasn't about healing America. It was about inflaming division, stoking anger, and playing on fears." This was not the J.D. Vance the public had grown to know, the outsider who had once praised Trump for shaking up the establishment. Instead, this was a new Vance, one who had begun to question everything he had once believed. While some conservatives were quick to label him a traitor, others in the party saw his comments as a beacon of hope. There was a growing faction of Republicans who felt that Vance had tapped into a truth that many were too afraid to say out loud, that the GOP needed a fresh vision, one not defined by Trump's personal battles or his controversial rhetoric. In the weeks that followed, more and more Republican figures began to speak out, subtly echoing Vance's sentiment. Some took a more measured approach, avoiding a direct break with Trump, but expressing their concerns about the direction the party was heading. Others, like Vance, were more vocal, making it clear that they believed the party needed to evolve. One prominent Republican senator, who had once been an outspoken Trump ally, privately told his colleagues, "We can't keep running on Trump's coattails forever. We need a platform that speaks to the future, not just the past." This sentiment began to ripple through GOP circles, from local county meetings to the corridors of Capitol Hill. The media, of course, seized upon every new development, turning each public statement into an all-out spectacle. The political press was no longer simply reporting on the battle for 2024. They were covering a civil war within the Republican Party. The debate was no longer just about Trump's role, it was about who would rise to challenge him and what the GOP would look like in the post-Trump era. For Vance, the fallout from his comments was significant. While some of his former supporters turned against him, others saw him as a brave figure who was willing to speak the truth. He quickly became a polarizing figure, hailed as a hero by those tired of Trump's grip on the party, and denounced by Trump loyalists as a turncoat. But despite the divisiveness, Vance's position was clear. He believed that the time had come for the Republican Party to confront its own future.
We do not seek to impose our way of life on anyone, but rather to let it shine as an example. We will shine for everyone to follow. We will reinforce all the
2024 primaries drew nearer. The battle lines within the GOP became even more pronounced. Trump, always a master of the political spotlight, refused to go quietly into the background. He lashed out at his critics, calling them weak and unfit to lead, while continuing to rally his base of supporters, many of whom viewed Vance's comments as a betrayal. Trump's followers were unwavering in their loyalty, and his influence remained a force to be reckoned with. Yet, Vance's rhetoric found a growing audience among those who felt that Trump's time had passed. It became clear that the former president's dominance over the Republican Party was no longer as unchallenged as it had once been. The question was no longer whether Trump would run again, it was whether his leadership could remain the driving force of the party, or whether a new generation of Republicans would rise up to take the reins. As the primary season approached, political analysts speculated about what the future might hold for Vance. Could he turn his critique of Trump into a full-fledged movement? Would he, or someone like him, be the one to lead the party in the years to come? Or would the GOP remain stuck in Trump's shadow, unable or unwilling to move forward?
Public record over the past few months. It doesn't sound like the guy who talks about childless cat ladies or who points a finger in the face of the Ukrainian president or who makes up lies about Haitian immigrants eating native-born Americans' pets in Springfield, Ohio. So for me, there's a mystery as to who this man is and how both voices are possible in the same human being. And the answer, I think, says almost more about America today than it does about J.D. Vance. Every human being remains a mystery to everyone else, and I don't pretend to have figured him out. But what it does show is a kind of failure of the country at every step of Vance's rise, which has been remarkable, which has been just a kind of storybook rise at age 40 to the vice presidency. There's been an American failure at every turn, and we can go through each of them if we have time, but that's the main takeaway that I've got from having spent a lot of time reading him and listening to him.
For now, Vance remained at the center of the conversation. His comments had ignited a firestorm within the Republican Party, one that showed no signs of dying down. Whether he was seen as a betrayer or a truth teller, Vance's decision to speak out had altered the political landscape in a way few had predicted. And while the battle for the future of the Republican Party was far from over, one thing was clear: the days of unquestioning loyalty to Trump were numbered. The question was no longer whether Trump's legacy would shape the party, it was whether the GOP would have the courage to break free from his influence and chart a new course. In the midst of all this, J.D. Vance's name became synonymous with change, a symbol of the shifting tides within the Republican Party. The question remained, though, would he be able to turn this pivotal moment into a political victory? Only time would tell. The scene closed with J.D. Vance standing at the center of the political storm he had helped ignite. As the dust settled from his dramatic comments, the Republican Party continued to churn with uncertainty. Behind the scenes, GOP power players were weighing their next moves, torn between allegiance to Trump and the idea of embracing new leadership. The media buzzed with speculation, pundits arguing passionately about the future of the party, some predicting an inevitable clash between the old guard and the new wave, led by voices like Vance. Despite the overwhelming backlash, Vance's resolve had not wavered. In interviews that followed, he expressed a mixture of regret and determination. "I didn't speak out because I wanted to make a spectacle," he said during a town hall meeting. "I spoke out because I believe this country deserves a different kind of leadership, one that unites, not divides, one that doesn't play to fear, but to hope." On the other side, Donald Trump continued to assert his dominance, lashing out at every perceived slight. His supporters remained fiercely loyal, flooding social media with messages of defiance. In one of his fiery rallies, Trump fired back at Vance's criticisms. "J.D. Vance was nothing before me," Trump roared to the crowd, receiving thunderous applause. "He was a loser, and now he's a loser who turned his back on the only one who helped him. They'll never win without me, believe me." But despite the constant barrage from Trump and his loyalists, the political tides were shifting. Republicans who had once rallied behind Trump's banner were now finding themselves at a crossroads. Conversations that had once been whispered in private about the need for change were now being spoken openly in the halls of power. As Vance prepared for a potential future that could involve him stepping into a higher role in the party, he knew that the road ahead would be fraught with challenges. The GOP was divided, the nation was divided, and the battle for the soul of the party had only just begun. But for the first time in a long time, he felt a sense of clarity. He knew that standing by his principles, no matter the cost, was the only path forward. As the scene fades, the image of J.D. Vance's determined face lingers, his words echoing in the background. "I didn't sign up for politics to be a puppet," he had said in his final interview before the cameras cut, "I'm here to fight for a future that's better than the one Trump offered us." The camera cuts away to the bustling political newsrooms, with reporters furiously typing their analysis of the moment. Vance's comments were more than just words. They had ignited a fire that could either burn out quickly or reshape the future of the GOP forever. The political world held its breath, waiting to see what would come next. If you want to stay on top of the latest political news and uncover the truth behind the headlines, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Stay informed, stay engaged, and keep the conversation going.